200 Comanche warriors don't just show up at your barn by accident. Asterisk, the thought struck him like a bullet ricocheting off the barn wall. Dust hung in the air, stirred by the weak afternoon wind, and sunlight slanted through the cracks in the boards, casting fractured lines across the hay. But this wasn't about warriors tonight. No, it was something smaller, quieter, more personal. The rancher's hand rested on the hitching post, knuckles white, eyes fixed on a figure that moved at the edge of his property like a shadow searching for purchase. Asterisk, she was thin. Thinner than a girl her age had any right to be. Her clothes ragged, dirt baked into the fabric. A bonnet shaded her pale face, but the bruises along her jawline betrayed a story the wind couldn't hide. The rancher's stomach tightened. He wanted to turn away, to call for the help of the neighbors, to close the gate and pretend this woman belonged to someone else. But something in her gaze, a mixture of defiance and desperate pleading, rooted him to the spot. Asterisk, wait, please. Just a moment, she whispered, voice cracking like dry twigs underfoot. Asterisk, the rancher stepped forward, boots sinking into the soft soil. He was tall, lean from years of chasing cattle across the plains, his sunburned face lined from wind and worry. His hands had carried rifles and rope, mended fences and broken dreams alike. But tonight, he had no rifle, no lariat. Only the ache in his chest and the memory of the girl who had once left him for a richer man. Asterisk. He remembered the day she'd walked away, her skirts brushing the prairie grass, her eyes avoiding his, the promise she left dangling like a loose rope in the wind. The gold-stamped envelopes in her hand, her family's approval smothering what had once been a quiet, tentative love. He'd watched the carriage wheels disappear over the horizon, heard her voice faintly call, wait. Wait, but he had not stopped. Not then, not ever. And now she was here again, begging at his gate like a shadow of the girl he thought he'd lost forever. Asterisk. The rancher's barn creaked as he leaned against it, nostrils flaring against the scent of hay, horses, and dry earth. He thought about the quiet hours after her departure. Nights spent staring into a fireplace, imagining a different life, one where she had stayed, where the world hadn't been so cruelly measured in money and advantage. Those nights had built him, hardened him, but they had also left him hollow. And now, she was back, with hollowed eyes and trembling hands. Asterisk, her lips moved again. I made a mistake. Please. Asterisk, wind carried her words across the yard, mingling with the scent of leather and manure. The rancher said nothing at first, only watched as her bonnet slipped, revealing the dark strands of hair plastered to her cheeks. A shiver ran down her spine despite the heat. He wanted to reach for her, to say something, anything that could bridge the canyon of years and betrayal. But the prairie is a quiet witness to indecision. It waits. And right now, the rancher felt the weight of waiting as if it were a physical thing pressing on his chest. Asterisk, he thought about the fences, the cattle, the work that had kept him alive and sane. He thought about the neighbors' whispers, the way they would judge, the way they would call a man weak for showing mercy to someone who had once wronged him. He thought about the promise he had made to himself. Never let sentiment cloud judgment. Never let regret undo the work of years. Asterisk. Yet, as she stepped closer, shoes scuffing dry dirt, eyes brimming with unshed tears. He felt it. That impossible tug of something neither reason nor pride could deny. The prairie stretched around them, golden and empty, as if holding its breath. And for the first time in a long while, the rancher realized he was standing at a crossroads, one path familiar, safe, ruled by the quiet discipline of solitude. The other uncharted, trembling, dangerous, but alive with the memory of what it meant to love, to forgive, to wait, or to act. The barn door creaked again as he shifted his weight. Dust motes swirling like ghosts around his boots. And then she spoke one last time before the silence fell like a verdict. Asterisk, please. Don't turn me away, not this time. Asterisk, the wind stilled. Even the horses seemed to listen. The rancher's throat went dry. Somewhere in that moment, between memory and the present, between what was lost and what might still be found, he understood that the next move, the first move, would set the course of everything to come, asterisk, and he had no choice but to act. He led her past the barn, past the rows of stacked hay that smelled of summer sweat and horses, into the shadowed kitchen. The sun was falling low, slanting gold across the wooden floorboards, highlighting the scratches and worn edges that told the story of decades. She flinched at every step, like the walls themselves might judge her. Asterisk, he set a tin cup on the table and filled it with water, watching her hands tremble as she reached for it. Her lips pressed against the rim, and for a moment, he almost turned away, reminded of the pride she had once carried so effortlessly. Now it was stripped bare, replaced by need, by something softer and more human. Asterisk, I don't know where else to go, she admitted, her voice barely more than a whisper. I have nowhere. Asterisk, he didn't answer immediately. Instead, he studied the faint bruises on her arms, the cut on her cheek that had scabbed over but still ached. The neighbor's warnings echoed faintly in his mind. Don't let her in. She's trouble. She's a reminder of mistakes better left in the past. He thought about the town, about gossip, about the judgmental eyes that always seemed to find him when he made the wrong choice. And yet, when he looked at her now, he saw someone human, someone suffering, someone who had made a terrible choice and paid for it. Asterisk, his hand rested on the edge of the table, close enough to brush hers if she reached out. He knew what the safe, socially correct choice would be. Send her away, close the door, maintain the hard-earned distance that had kept him sane all these years. But the eyes that met his were not just pleading, they were honest. Asterisk, sit, he said finally. The word sounded strange in his own ears, heavy with more than just command. It carried mercy, unease, and the unspoken question of whether he would forgive, whether he could. Asterisk, she obeyed, perching on the edge of the chair as if it might crumble under her weight. Her boots were caked with mud, and the smell of the road clung to her like a second skin. He grabbed a rag from the counter and dabbed at the worst of it, ignoring the sharp protest of her jaw as he gently wiped the dried blood. Asterisk, outside, the wind shifted. Somewhere down the lane, a neighbor's voice carried, raised in suspicion. Bear, what are you doing in there with her? That woman's trouble, I tell ya. Asterisk, he didn't answer, only worked quietly. Every brush of the rag against her skin was a negotiation, a weighing of consequences against compassion. He could hear the murmurs of the town, feel the invisible eyes tracking him, judging him, questioning the morality of his choice. But he kept going, steady and deliberate, because the quiet suffering in front of him mattered more than the gossip of people who had never known loss, or longing, or regret. She looked up finally, eyes meeting his. There was something raw in that glance, something that cut through years of resentment, a quiet confession. I didn't mean for it to happen, she whispered. I thought I was making the right choice. But I was wrong. And her voice broke, swallowed by a cough that rattled deep in her chest. He paused, the rag suspended mid-air. His throat was tight. He had learned over the years that moral choices were rarely clean or easy, that right and wrong often blurred into shades of gray. Helping her now would anger the town, fuel speculation, maybe even ruin his reputation. Turning her away would protect him, keep his life in neat, predictable lines. But he reached out and touched her shoulder, firm and steady. We all make mistakes, he said, voice low, measured. What matters now is what you do with the chance you've got left. Her breath hitched, and she nodded slowly. Outside, the whispers continued, growing louder, more insistent. But inside that small, dim kitchen, the world had narrowed to a single point of human connection. The rancher knew the path forward was risky. He knew the neighbors would call him soft, that they would fear him for crossing invisible lines of propriety and pride. Yet he had made the decision. And sometimes, the right choice is the one that nobody else understands. The first sound was faint at first, the slow, rhythmic clatter of hooves over hard-packed dirt. He paused, hand on the kitchen doorframe, listening. The wind carried whispers from the horizon, low murmurs that could have been anything, cattle moving, the creek running, a storm rising. But deep in his chest, a cold certainty settled. This was no ordinary traveler. By the time he stepped outside, the sun had dipped lower, the sky streaked with bruised shades of orange and purple. Across the fields, dust spiraled in small columns, small at first, then larger, darker. Shapes emerged through the haze. Riders, mounted men, hats pulled low, eyes shaded against the setting sun. The rancher's stomach dropped. They're coming, he muttered to himself, voice rough. He didn't have to say it out loud for her to understand. She stiffened beside him, hands clutching the edge of the porch like a lifeline. The leader's horse was larger than the rest, black as midnight, nostrils flaring. He raised a hand slightly, a signal, subtle but precise. The others slowed, fanning out across the field, forming a loose line that tightened with every step toward the ranch. Their intent was clear. They weren't curious. They weren't lost. They were here with purpose. Inside, the rancher's mind raced. The town had always whispered about justice, about how wrongs must be repaid with blood, how kindness could be mistaken for weakness. And now, as the riders drew closer, he understood that mercy could be dangerous, that a good deed might stir fear, anger, or vengeance. Bear, she whispered, almost to herself. Her hand brushed against his arm. He glanced down, noting the sudden tremor in her fingers, the tension that had returned to her shoulders. They won't understand. I know, he said. His voice was steady, calm in tone but carrying the weight of every decision he'd made tonight. But we can't let fear decide what's right. The riders stopped at the edge of the field, 100 yards away, hats tipped low, eyes unblinking. One of them raised his voice, sharp and demanding. "Rancher, step forward. Don't let her hide behind your walls. That woman's wanted." The rancher's chest tightened. He knew the stories how towns like this turned small mistakes into legends of shame, how they would form mobs, burn homes, chase away anyone who dared act against their rigid ideas of justice. Yet he did not move. He remained on the porch, the girl close by, watching the horizon. "Waiting, they're going to take her," she said, almost pleading now. Her eyes were wide, reflecting the last gold of sunset. "They'll hurt you, too." He shook his head slightly. "Then they'll see that kindness isn't weakness. That mercy doesn't mean we fold to threats. We face it together." The riders nudged forward, hooves grinding the earth, leather creaking. The scent of smoke and sweat and danger carried by the wind. The rancher could see their fingers twitch near holsters, feel the tension in the spines of the horses beneath them. And yet he held his ground. He took a slow step down from the porch, letting the wind brush past him, letting the fading light illuminate his face, weathered and resolute. The girl followed, staying just behind him, small and fragile, yet present in a way that made the confrontation real, immediate, unavoidable. "You've got one chance to do the right thing." The leader called out, voice loud, echoing across the prairie. "Send her back, or we take her. And we won't be gentle." The rancher's eyes met the leader's across the open field. There was a stillness between them, a pause heavier than any words. Around them, the prairie seemed to hold its breath, the grass swaying gently as if unsure whether to side with the law, with the mob, or with the quiet act of mercy that stood firm in defiance. He knew that once he stepped forward, once he spoke, once he acted, there would be no retreat, no easy escape. The choice was simple, cruelly simple: yield to fear, protect himself, and abandon the girl, or stand, endure, and hope the rightness of his actions could outlast the anger of others. And in that silence, in that suspended moment, he understood something he hadn't realized before. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's moving forward despite it. The wind had dropped to a hush, leaving only the soft creak of the porch boards beneath their feet. He and the girl stood side by side, facing the line of riders who had paused, tense and watchful, at the edge of the field. The rancher could feel her trembling, the faint pulse of fear vibrating against him. And yet there was a stubborn light in her eyes that refused to break. "You don't understand," she said suddenly, her voice carrying across the space between them. "I know what I did. I left you. I chose him. For wealth, for safety, for something I thought would make life easier. But it didn't. It never did. And now I have nothing." Her voice faltered, choked with emotion, but she lifted her chin, meeting his gaze with a raw honesty that made his heart clench. He said nothing at first, letting her words settle like stones in the still air. The riders shifted uneasily, whispering among themselves, but no one spoke. It was as if the prairie itself had grown quiet, holding space for the confession that needed to be heard. Asterisk, you are judging me, she continued, but do you see me as I am now? Not as the mistake I made, but as the person standing here, asking for a chance to do right. Her hands clenched at her sides, knuckles white, yet there was a dignity in her stance that defied the dust and ragged edges of her appearance. Asterisk, he finally spoke, voice low and deliberate. People don't often see others clearly. They see the surface. The choices made in haste. The pride that got in the way. But I see you. He paused, letting the words sink. I see the fear, the regret, the courage it took to come back, and that counts for more than any mistake you've made. Asterisk, her eyes filled, but this time it was not only fear. There was relief, a trembling hope, and in that moment, the rancher realized that whatever came next, judgment, anger, even violence, had already shifted. They had crossed the threshold of mere survival and entered something far more fragile and dangerous. Understanding, asterisk, one of the riders, younger than the rest, spoke up, his voice wavering. Sir, shouldn't we? Asterisk, no. The rancher cut him off, sharp but calm. Stop talking, he turned to the girl. You've got to say it. They need to hear it from you, not me. Asterisk, she swallowed hard, took a deep breath, and stepped forward slightly. I made my choice once, she said, voice steadying with each word, and it cost me everything. But I am asking now, for honesty, for a chance to make things right. Not just for me, but for all of us. Judging me won't undo the past. Showing mercy might shape what comes next. Asterisk, the riders were silent. Some shifted uncomfortably in their saddles. Others squinted against the setting sun. The tension was thick, yet there was a change, subtle but unmistakable. The raw truth of her words had softened the hard edges of fear and anger. Asterisk, the rancher reached out, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. See, courage isn't just standing up to others. It's standing up to yourself, and you. You've done that. Asterisk, her lips trembled, forming a fragile, almost shy smile. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the field, illuminating the lines of worry etched into the rancher's face. And somehow, despite the danger that still lingered in the distance, there was peace in that gesture. In that shared acknowledgement of vulnerability and strength. Asterisk, for a long moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, the leader of the riders nodded once, curtly, not in surrender, not in agreement, but in recognition. He lowered his hand, signaling the others to ease. Hooves scuffed softly against dirt. Eyes shifted from threat to wary observation. The air, once taut with threat, now carried the quiet weight of understanding. Asterisk, the rancher exhaled, his shoulders loosening for the first time since the riders had arrived. She looked up at him, eyes glistening, and he knew that, regardless of what came next, this was a turning point. Human connection had bridged the chasm between judgment and mercy, and for the first time in years, he felt that the world might not be as unforgiving as it seemed. Asterisk, somewhere behind them, the prairie whispered against the horizon, carrying the faint scent of sage and dust. Silence stretched, not empty, but alive with possibility. Asterisk, and in that fragile, breathing stillness, They both understood that the hardest battles were not fought with guns or fists, but with hearts willing to speak truth, to forgive, and to stand together, even when the world insisted otherwise. The dawn was slow to come, brushing the horizon with muted gold that softened the edges of the world. The riders had left, retreating quietly, their shadows melting into the prairie. The girl stood near the barn, hands clasped together, watching the horizon as if she could make sense of the night's chaos in the pale morning light. The rancher approached her slowly, boots crunching on the frost-tinged soil. He stopped a few feet away, letting the silence stretch, letting the stillness of the dawn carry the weight of what had passed. No words were needed. The events of the previous evening, the fear, the confrontation, the raw confession hung between them like smoke. Faint but lingering. You stayed, she said softly, barely audible above the morning breeze. He nodded, shoulders relaxed now, though his eyes retained the quiet vigilance of a man shaped by decades of hardship. I didn't leave, he said. I couldn't. Some things are worth standing for, no matter the cost. She exhaled slowly, the breath trembling, and let herself sink onto the steps of the barn. I thought I was too late, she admitted. I thought you'd never forgive me. Never give me a chance to make it right. You were never too late, he replied. The choice isn't just mine. It's ours. And right now, the only thing that matters is what we do next. Her eyes lingered on him, searching, vulnerable, yet somehow stronger than the day she had walked away all those years ago. For the first time, she saw the quiet courage that had always lived behind his calm exterior, the patience, the steady hand, the unwillingness to abandon what was right. She saw that he had not only survived, but endured, and that enduring had made him more than just a man. It had made him someone capable of mercy that demanded its own kind of bravery. They moved inside the barn, and he fetched a worn chair, setting it near the corner where sunlight spilled across the floorboards. She sank into it, exhausted from the emotional storm of the night, and he placed a cup of coffee beside her, strong and dark, the bitter warmth a small comfort against the lingering chill. For hours. They spoke quietly, tentatively, sharing pieces of lost time. The mistakes, the regrets, the roads not taken, all laid bare in a way that demanded neither pretense nor judgment. He listened, as he had listened all these years, and she spoke, as she had never dared to speak before. Words became bridges, connecting past and present, mistakes and forgiveness, fear and trust. Outside the prairie was waking. A lone hawk circled overhead, gliding against the soft morning sky. Horses stirred in the pens, snuffling the frost-kissed ground. The rancher stepped to the doorway and surveyed the land he had worked so hard to protect. Everything seemed sharper, clearer, and somehow lighter. The danger had passed, but the lesson lingered. Courage and kindness were inseparable, and human connection could temper even the harshest world. She watched him from the corner of her eyes, feeling a fragile hope stir in her chest. I don't deserve this, she whispered. Maybe not, he said, gentle but firm. But we're not measured by what we deserve. We're measured by what we choose to do next. Asterisk, a quiet understanding passed between them, the kind that needed no ceremony, no grand gestures. The past was still there, shadowing the edges of their hearts, but it no longer had power over the present. Together, they began to sweep the barn, stack the hay, and mend the fences, mundane tasks infused with an unexpected grace. Proof that life could continue, that work could heal, and that second chances were as real as the sunrise. Asterisk, years later. She would stay on the ranch, not as a reminder of mistakes, but as a partner in the life they built together. She would plant gardens, tend to the livestock, and carry herself with a quiet pride born of hard-won humility. The neighbors, initially skeptical, would come to respect the woman who had returned, not for wealth or status, but for honesty and courage. Asterisk, and he would remain steady as ever. The man who had learned that love and mercy were acts of strength, not weakness. He had faced judgment, threats, and the ghosts of the past and had stood unwavering. The prairie stretched endlessly before them, golden and forgiving, holding the promise that even after betrayal, even after heartbreak, the world could bend to those brave enough to speak truth, extend mercy, and choose connection over fear. Asterisk, the barn door creaked softly in the morning wind. The girl rose, brushing the dust from her skirt, and met his gaze. A faint smile curved her lips, tentative but real. He nodded once, and in that single gesture, decades of pain, longing, and uncertainty were reconciled. Asterisk, outside. The prairie gleamed under the new sun, vast and quiet, holding the memory of mistakes and the quiet glory of second chances. And in the calm, they finally found what they had both been searching for, not a life free of regret, but a life worthy of it.